and then we will go back to the forestry paper on page 29. So let's go. Thank you, gentlemen. So perhaps I'll hand this over to Mr. Drury to kick it off, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Every 3 years, councillors see one of these valuation papers. Last time, 2012, it was a valuation specifically of the port. However, port assets are now held by our investment company, HBRIC, so the exercise required was to value our investment company, HBRIC Ltd, and Deloitte have been commissioned to undertake that valuation. They went through a competitive process, and once again they came out, and as Mr. Newman pointed out, it was the same team, so that certainly helped the exercise being done, which is always a very long exercise. The reason for this report is for council to decide what value to adopt as its value of our investment in HBRIC. A little bit of background there. Council currently owns 100% of the shares in HBRIC. These shares were issued by HBRIC to this council February 2012, 100,000 $1 shares, and that was for working capital requirements back in 2012. In April 2012, a further 177,400,000 shares were issued by HBRIC in order to effect the transfer of Napier Port over to our investment company, and that was the value of Napier Port as recommended by the Board of Directors of Napier Port to this council in April 2012. And as Mr. Pearce has indicated, that was at the lower end of the continuum, and it wasn't at a midpoint. The recommendation from the board of Napier Port was to take the bottom end, and I have looked up the file of their reasons, and it was to take account of the general level of business uncertainty at that time. As we move through this paper, you'll see that the recommendation is not a low point in this paper. Valuation of shares then. Attachment 1 is the Deloitte's report on their approach to the valuation of HBRIC and their recommendation. Now, as about 99% of the valuation is the port of pertains to the port of Napier, it's important that council has a recommendation from HBRIC as to the value that board has placed on the Napier Port investment in HBRIC's balance sheet. And we have as attachment 2 a letter from Dr. Pearce with his recommendation, or its board's recommendation, that the midpoint valuation for Napier Port be taken. That's what they have adopted in their accounts, and they recommend that council does the same. So given that recommendation for midpoint, it follows on that the recommendation in this paper is for this council to adopt the midpoint valuation for HBRIC, which is an amount of $235,220,000, an increase of just over $57 million on the valuations 3 years ago, which is quite a very healthy result.
I actually had Councillor Hewitt and then Councillor Graham.
Thank you. Dr. Pearce answered one of my questions earlier, which was why do we agree, why was the recommendation to settle midway? And that was the recommendation, I understand, of the Deloitte's in the valuation. So my question is a little more historic, and to you, Paul, I understand last time the port was revalued, there was a range given of 177 million up to 203 million. So now we've got, give or take, 38 million. 3 years ago you had a give or take of 26 million. So what was the reasoning for the council to take the lower point in that 3 years ago as opposed to a mid-range, and was that against the recommendation of the valuer, or just a bit of history there would be helpful.
Thanks, Councillor. The valuation report wasn't held by this council, it went to Napier Port, so I'm not aware of what the valuation that Deloitte's recommended in that report. But the Napier Port Board of Directors studied that report and recommended to this council to take the lower point. And the only comment that I've got here, which would have been taken right from their letter to us, was a recommendation from the Board of Directors for the lower level, given general level of business uncertainty at that time. I think we were moving into the financial crisis at that time. It's all to do with tonnage, and I guess, isn't it? Maintaining of future tonnages.
Can I perhaps assist, although I wasn't part of that original of the decision making at that time? But at that time, as I understand it, the Port of Napier commissioned its own valuation and made a recommendation to the council. The council didn't commission a valuation. In discussion with Mr. Jury some time ago, we agreed that the group should follow what is now kind of best practice for all of this, that the council should commission a set of valuations, which are a valuation of its financial investment in HBRIC and a valuation of HBRIC's financial investment in the Port of Napier. Because if all three parties went away, we'd be paying too much for all different valuations and they wouldn't necessarily come to the same answer. So that is the process that's been followed by Mr. Drury and his team. But HBRIC received the report on the Port of Napier and the recommendation to accept the midpoint, and that's the basis on which we have recommended up to council that the midpoint should be used. The rationale for why it was the lower point of the valuation last time, I'm not aware of.
Mr. Jury, you may be able to help me here. I may have this wrong. We're valuing our share in HBRIC at 335 mil, and yet the share in the port is 338 mil, which HBRIC owns 100% of. Also, so our share, 235 mil, you said it was a percentage of the port. It's actually not. We also, on the HBRIC balance sheet, we're capitalising this chief executive's salary, which I disagree with, but we are. We're also capitalising a lot of work which is regarding his intellectual property, and so presumably we're going to sell that as a bulk package to the new water storage company, and we're going to recover our money. So, because it's on our balance sheet. So why aren't we valuing that? When we value HBRIC, why aren't we including those balance sheet assets in our valuation?
Yeah, Councillor, I think you're referring to page 55 of this report, which is the first...
52.
The first page of Deloitte's?
No, I'm accepting the Deloitte's valuation, which I think is sensible. The midterm, 238 million.
Just for clarification, at the top of page 52, if the Port of Napier was removed from HBRIC's balance sheet, it would be worth -3 million.
Yeah.
HBRIC would be.
No,
How do you make sense of that?
Yeah, councillors, that's why I'm referring you to page 55. I thought that's where you were. Page 55, which is the first page of the Deloitte report. I mean, these valuations are never easy. So the first page there on Deloitte's, and I'm referring to the table at the bottom there, and we'll take you through that. I mean, we've got the Napier Port equity, and that's what Dr. Pearce has just talked about. You've got a low and a midpoint and a high, and the HBRIC have accepted the midpoint, which is 238.4, and that's Dr. Pearce's letter. Okay.
And we have accepted that as well.
Okay, good. The next line is the Ruataniwha carrying costs, and what they have done for their valuations is said that there's a capitalised expenditure on the Ruataniwha, so that's of value. And then what they've done is said, well, HBRIC currently would owe that money back to council if it doesn't proceed. So they have minused that off. There's a liability, there's an obligation. So it doesn't raise value at this particular time. The next line is an interesting one. They've deducted 3 million off, and they've basically capitalised the value of future management and governance costs, and they've adjusted that from future profit streams for the valuation. Now, I'm not a valuer, but obviously this is what they do for valuations. They look at the future of that of investment companies, to run their investment companies, and there is an obligation to fund that, and have recognised a value of 3 million, which is basically a multiplier of 6 times the annual administration costs. Now, Alan Dent's not here to say why that's what they do, but that's what they have done. So, sorry? Yes. Yeah. There needs to be some recognition of this. The figure that they've taken is 3 million.
Further questions? You're happy to move, Councillor Bevan? You're happy to second, Councillor Scott? Just before we do, Councillor Graham, are we good there, or
You know,
you accept that?
I suppose as a book valuation it's okay, but if we flogged HBRIC we would get a lot more.
Which we're not actually going to do that. Not at today's meeting anyway, or subsequent ones. Going concern. Mover. Mover, do you wish to speak?
No, I can't sensibly add to the conversation, so I won't.
Seconder. Any other speakers? Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. Thank you, Dr. Pearce. Flogging's notwithstanding, and we will go back to number 11 on page 29. Proposed national environmental standard for plantation forestry. I think we have. Give 29. And thank you. Let's catch up with our agenda here. So, I suppose, do you wish to lead us all?
Brief introduction. Yep.
Microphone.
This
So,
item was originally intended to be reported to and presented at the Regional Planning Committee meeting a couple of weeks ago, but obviously that meeting was cancelled, and we're here now at the council meeting to discuss the same sort of issue. Ministry for the Environment and Ministry for Primary Industries has released a discussion document outlining a proposal for a national environment standard. This is a third crack at such a proposal, or third public go at crafting such a national environmental standard for plantation forestry. The Regional Council has made submissions on those 2 earlier occasions, and so this paper is about asking or recommending the Council does indeed make a submission, but there's a bit of a catch to that. Due to the timeframes of when the proposal was originally released and when council meetings are scheduled and when the submission deadline looms on the 11th of August, there are some time constraints about how much time the staff have had to fully analyse the proposal, report it through to council. So what you don't see here today is a draft submission for your consideration. The best effort we have made in the short time has been what's outlined in Appendix 1, which is just a summary of the key themes and possible key issues, I suppose, that a submission might well take. Staff do not currently have delegated authority to make submissions on national instruments, bills or anything like that. That authority rests still with the council. But this paper does, well, in the context of the time frame for submissions being 11th of August and no further meetings of council scheduled between now and then, this paper asks and recommends that staff are indeed given delegated authority to lodge a submission on this discussion document on the council's behalf. And if we were given that authority, delegated authority through Helen Codlin, the submission would very much kind of align to the themes and key issues outlined already in Appendix 1. There'll be other bits and pieces of other details, not quite clause by clause, word by word analysis, but certainly picking up another level of detail again in our submission over and above what's already outlined in Appendix 1. We're open for all staff, if there is going to be a submission on this discussion document made on behalf of the council, and that is in the hands of the council staff to compile and draft, we are more than open to receiving feedback from councillors, and I've even invited members of the Tangata Whenua members of the Regional Planning Committee for feedback on the NES. That's not to say that the NES discussion document is only open for councils to submit on. Any member of the public can make a submission at this point in time.
So individuals around this table can make a submission? Right, any questions? Councillor Scott.
Clarification around the process, and I appreciate the thoroughness that so far the key themes has gone into. Feedback is feedback, not requests for particular points to be made on behalf of any one individual. Well, Mr. Chairman, let's say one of us decides that we disagree with a particular thing and we want that changed. It's actually something we might raise if the staff don't agree with it. Why? And they've got delegated authority. Why would one particular person, either an RPC member or a councillor, make the decision? If we delegate the authority, it's feedback on things which may or may not be incorporated into.
Absolutely, but
Yeah.
you wouldn't want to stifle.
No, I'm not trying to
Views.
stifle it, but I
People
don't
have
want
a
it
strong
at a
view,
later
they
stage
should express
for,
it,
for one
surely.
person who might be wanting to make a submission on their part to actually say, well, this is what I want in the council submission.
But it could be explained to them that they have their own opportunity to
Yeah,
raise that particular point.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. Councillor Barker.
I have a contrary view to that. We come here as individuals. We write a submission on this, we act as an individual. The submission that goes in on behalf of the regional council goes in on behalf of the regional council. And in my view, the opinion of a governor of the regional council should be taken into account and be part of it. What's being suggested here is a staff member's view will hold sway over governor's view. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with it. I agree we should make a submission, and I agree it should be something which is pretty potent given the effects we've had before. And I would like to see it have some, politics in it, some punch to give it. How we do that via a staff submission, I'm not sure. I think I would prefer an alternative. The draft submission is put together. We can all circulate it by email. People can put their comments in, by email to all. We can all have sight of them. And I'm quite confident that at the end of that process, we will come quite quickly to a submission which we can sign off as governors. And I'd much rather be involved in that than delegate it to someone and then have, if I want to make a comment, have a comment which can be ignored at whim. I don't agree with that.
Mr Chief Executive,
Well,
please, a chance to shine here.
Yeah, so personally I don't see any challenges in the process Councillor Barker's just laid out. Effectively what we're wanting is the delegated authority for staff to sign and send forth the submission, because we won't have that luxury at the end of the process, but it doesn't preclude at the start of the process engagement with the councillors over a draft submission via email to provide feedback, or not feedback, to provide substantive input to shape and craft the overall content. So personally, I don't see an issue with that. What we will obviously need to do is lay out pretty clearly timeframes by which we will need that input to meet our required deadlines.
I think so we all feel comfortable in the space. I think it's much better process.
But there's a qualification to that, Mr Chairman, and that is that someone must have editorial control. Otherwise you have a shambles. Someone's got to be able to make the decision what goes in and what doesn't.
The answer to that, in my view, is very simple. The chair.
Fair enough.
If I can clarify, that has been an approach that we've used in the past where the chair, in the absence of the council meeting, the chair and I think the CE have co-signed submissions, bond bills.
Well, let's, I don't think there's any particular questions around the, while we're waiting for a draft to come back. Is someone happy to move and put a 0.3 in that's what happens, perhaps?
Well, I'm happy to move with a 0.3 that the draft submission be circulated to all councillors for comment and input, those comments to be circulated to all councillors. In the event of a disagreement on the editorial content, that be left to the chair of the council to resolve and finalise it.
So could we have the first sentence and half the last sentence, and that might get us there?
Well,
Our scribe will get RSI, Councillor Barker,
I'll
writing
write it
out
out
that
for
as a
you.
recommendation.
I'll write it out for you, like.
Okay. Before we, well, that's a motion there, but before I take a second, are there actually any questions around the content? Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, I did have a question. Can you just clarify for me, at the moment, if you own a qualifying plantation and you want to harvest it, you don't need a resource consent, you just go in and do it, is that right?
If that was under the Hawke's Bay Regional Council's rules, yes, that's correct.
We've got the
But
expert in the room.
it may not be the same situation in every other part of the country.
We've got the guy at the coalface here,
Okay.
so
All right, let's hear.
welcome.
James Parry,
Sorry, James.
Team leader for natural assets. And the land management team. So there's no specific requirement for resource consent relating to forestry activities as a named industry, but there are resource consents required where stream crossings affecting the stream bed need to be constructed. And the resource consents that we have on our books relating to forestry now relate to those. So in the event that the stream bed needs to be modified for a catchment of 150 hectares or greater upstream of that crossing point, then a consent will specify the design of that stream crossing or structure. So,
Okay, so just a follow-up question, because I mean, I'm reluctant to get involved in regulation if regulation's not required. So are you satisfied that the environmental risks when we come to harvest management are such that having a national standard like this is justifiable?
yeah, it's justifiable. It will require more bureaucratic input here than we currently have, but in a national sense, it's going to provide for a unified approach to forestry activity, and for the industry and for the simplicity around administering that. That's the principal benefit of an NES, but there is a lot of detail still to be addressed, and that's what our submission will do.
Chair? Woohoo.
Just trying to decipher the third part of sorry, Councillor Graham.
Will this standard be enforceable?
In a general sense, yes, but when you, as James referred to, some of the devil in detail has ambiguities in the words, terms, phrases, thresholds used, and so when you get down to the tin tax, yeah, there will be some challenges around its enforceability as currently drafted. I mean, that's what a submission process hopefully kind of reveals and irons out some of those wrinkles. So national instruments like this can be a much more implementable, enforceable.
Surprises are good. You will get that on the screen. Further questions, Councillor Pipe?
Yeah, James, you've been involved in the forestry industry pretty much all your life, haven't you? So, you know, I know a little bit about it, and I guess none of us around this table here know the amount that you know. So we rely very much on the expertise of people like you out there. These standards then are a good thing as far as you're concerned?
They have the potential to be if they're drafted in a way that reflects more the points of submission that we're making.
Were you involved in those points of submission then?
Yes, correct.
You were, okay.
Yep.
I'll just add to the conversation. One of my concerns as sort of managing the regulatory team in council was there was a very strong, and I think still is a very strong emphasis on permitted activity rules. So in the framework and the matrix, the smallest proportion in the bottom of the corner where matters of which consents might be required. Otherwise, there was a lot of burden on the council, in essence, to look at, review, maintain compliance with activities that were permitted. And of course, given they're permitted, there is no resource consent, therefore no costs are recoverable. So I'm particularly interested in those elements. I don't disagree that the NES has huge potential to deliver much greater environmental outcomes, but I don't want to see that sitting, all of the burden of that sitting with the council and general ratepayer to achieve those things. So got a particular interest in ensuring that comes through in the NES, because my reflection is that it's kind of it fits the MO of government to kind of push the responsibility back to the regions and ask us to carry the costs as well. But the costs, in my view, should lie where they're being incurred through the activity.
Everyone clear?
Better to say that the final content to be decided by the chairman.
And take out number 2. Don't delegate the authority. Everyone,
Request that we don't have any disagreement, just take that out and put with the final content to be.
I agree with that. Statement positive.
and take the 2 out. Okay, so mover, seconder, everyone happy with that? Councillor Dick, you happy with that?
Yeah.
Further discussion? Councillor Graham.
I'm very interested in this after visiting Mahi, seeing the damage to small communities by irresponsible foresters. Unlike Councillor Hewitt, I don't think all farmers or people of the land are responsible, and in many cases you have to control them. And I had a very good example in the dairy industry. Fonterra do their best, but they don't even do half as well as they bloody well should. So unless we legislate, unless we have teeth against these foresters, the carnage that they caused in places, in small communities, and it's not all foresters. I understand that the Mohaka, some of the forests in the Mohaka, the people of Mohaka have been in discussions with them, and there's been a lot of work done up in the forest there to mitigate damage. But certainly, it was Pampak, yeah. They've got a kaumātua who thinks he knows all about things. Calling what did he say, the harpoos of Hastings. Well, there's no harpoos in Hastings, I just tell you that. Unless we got teeth, they'll continue to do this, and we saw the photographs of the hills, the rubbish that's still up there that's going to come down. This is a continual problem that's going to hit us. And it comes out of the Gisborne district, not ours, so we haven't even got any power there. And I take up Mr Maxwell's point of view, unless we consent and we can recover costs, the general ratepayer is going to pay for this. It's an activity which is affecting, a commercial activity which adversely affects other people, and it's got to stop.
Order, Councillor Barker. As mover, do you wish to sum up? Or?
Couldn't after that.
It's very hard.
Power and action, I like to leave him that before.
I'll put the motion, and all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Thank you.